Officials in Iran say 8 inmates are dead after unrest at Tehran's Evin prison. The victims allegedly died of smoke inhalation during a fire. Officials have denied a link to the mass protests sweeping the country. Hundreds of demonstrators are being held at the prison as nationwide anti-government protests rage, weeks after a young woman died in police custody. European Union foreign ministers meet today to discuss the bloc's response to the Iranian regime's violent crackdown of protests. They're divided over what, if any, sanctions may be an effective tool to influence Iran's leadership. DW's Maksanda has this report from Brussels.
The pain runs deep, and these women have chosen not to be quiet. They have taken to the streets of Brussels to echo the voices of women leading the protests in Iran.
If you can't choose, if you can't control your body, if you can't control your marriage, if you can't say, I want to have freedom, how you can be, I'm a human being?
Fariba Amirkizi is one of the protest organizers. Her group wants to keep the momentum going and keep the world's attention on the struggle back home. For weeks now, people have been demonstrating in Iran. Activists say some 200 have died in protests defying a violent crackdown by authorities. The European Union is yet to take action. So far, the European Parliament has voted on a resolution calling for sanctions against Tehran. Belgian left MEP Mark Botenga belongs to the minority not supporting this.
If we want to have an impact, I think we need to engage, to commit, and even perhaps reconsider sanctions that are in place. Because one of the absurdities today is that people protesting have more difficulties accessing internet or like messaging apps, Skype and so on, because of Western sanctions. So that makes no sense at all.
EU foreign ministers are expected to approve penalties. These sanctions will likely target 16 individuals and entities connected to the government's brutal response to the protests. Human rights sanctions have been in place for years with no measurable effect in changing the behavior of the Iranian regime.
These new sanctions might in fact not move the needle much among a sanction-hardened regime. But we know from their statements that the EU should back down on its sanctions, that it does not like them. So these sanctions send an important signal of moral support to the protesters and indeed to European citizens that their union stands for freedom of expression and against torture and extrajudicial killings.
Protesters in Brussels are divided on the issue of sanctions. Fariba Amirkizi says she believes they will hurt the Iranian people, not the government.
We want to overthrow the Iranian regime. We want to ask you to do nothing. That's the thing we want to ask. Nothing. We will do that. Just don't deal with Iranian regime.
Most here agree. Change in Iran will depend on the struggle of Iranians themselves, and not the West.
Well, Siba Shakib is an Iranian-German filmmaker and political activist. She was born and grew up in Tehran. Welcome back to the show. Good to see you again. Do you think more sanctions will help or hinder the struggle for civic and human rights in Iran?
I think it cannot be said sanction yes or no. The Iranian regime has to be sanctioned. There has to be no ties to the Iranian regime, to the officials in the government. But the people, as soon as the people are going to be hurt, for instance, what we just heard, that people cannot connect with Europe or with America, with friends, with activists outside the country, that harms the people and that is not good. So there has to be a very strict differentiation. Anything that harms the government, yes. Anything that harms the people, no.
Are you able to communicate effectively with friends and contacts inside Iran? And what are you hearing from them?
It is very difficult at times. At times it becomes easier because we also have to take into account closing down internet harms the Iranian government as well, harms the Iranian economy. They lose millions and billions of dollars for each hour that they close down or slow down internet, so they have to open it. And these are the things, the moments when we can communicate as well. And what I hear is that people will not stop until this government is thrown over. So better for Germany, Europe, America, the United States to put themselves on the side of the people and cut all ties to the regime, call in the ambassadors, close the embassies, and even we have begun in some places in the world to go to the embassies and take ownership of the embassies because they are being led by the same government, by the same people who have blood on their hands, and we have to take these consulates and embassies out of their hands. And this is what the governments in Europe and in the United States can do as well.
I asked you this last time we spoke, but what are women risking in Iran at the moment by just taking to the streets, by, even taking their hijabs off or cutting their hair?
I remember this question and I thought about it since you asked me, and I can only repeat everything. We lose everything in Iran because we show a little bit of hair, as if this hair has become the most dangerous weapon in the world. It seems to be more dangerous than nuclear weapons. Two things to that. If the foreign countries want to stop Iran from having nuclear power, they should cut the ties once again, cut the ties to the Iranian regime. And second, what do women lose? As a woman in Iran, it's not just the moment when you're outside and you protest and you risk your life and you can die, but it's your whole for the rest of your life. You're under this pressure, under this inhuman act that you as a woman are not worth as much as a man.
Siba Shahib, thank you very much for talking to us again, Iranian writer and political activist, talking about the situation there in Iran right now.